Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over my Masterpiece Chase cards for the upcoming Outlaws of Thunder Junction set. So, let's get into it. I'm going to try something a little bit different this time with my Chase list. I'll give you the same sort of information that I normally do, but then I'm going to grade the cards on a scale of 0 to 10 on how chase-worthy I think they are. 10 is the most chase-worthy, and 0 would be the least chase-worthy. If it's a 0, it shouldn't be on my list. So these are all going to be higher up values, but this gives you more of an idea of like where I'm thinking these cards rank in terms of like you're chasing them, right? So this first card is going to be Back in Town. This is a black spell. It's an 18 mana spell. Has flash, and you're going to return all outlaw and mount cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then your opponent's going to lose life, and you're going to gain life equal to the total power of creatures you control. So this card looks incredibly powerful to me, especially if we wind up getting events that require us to play outlaws. It's just like a complete kill card, right? Or mounts, either way, right? Like it's just, you're going to dominate your opponent with this card for sure. Returning everything and then making your opponent lose life and then you gain life equal to your total power is really good. You could run this with effects like Gather the Pack, where you're going to be throwing a whole bunch of creatures into your graveyard. So for that, you need to be running black and green. You could be running this with a black planeswalker that mills a bunch, right? We've got a Liliana that her first ability is going to mill 8 cards. We've got a bunch of ways of throwing things in the graveyard in general, and so I could see this being a phenomenal kill card, and a card that allows you to just sort of play a deck over and over and over again, because you're also going to be gaining a ton of life out of it. This card for me is around a 7 out of 10, I think, right? It's going to be situationally good, because it's only really great for outlaws and mounts. I think that because you have to return all outlaw and mount cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, I'm guessing you need to have at least one outlaw or mount in your graveyard to play this card. If that's not the case, you could just use this as a nuke to have your creatures out and then play this to just do damage and gain life, which would be really cool. You don't even have to return things, but my guess is that you'll need to. So this is going to sit in that 7 out of 10 just because it's specific to outlaws and mounts, but I do think it will be very powerful. Next one on my list is Demolition Field. This card here is a 12 mana support. You're going to activate 2 of each color, so a total of 10 gems. And then when those activated gems are matched or destroyed, you're going to gain 4 mana and then destroy a random opposing support. This effect can affect vanguards. This card here is a 9 out of 10 for me. This card is a phenomenal card. I think it's like tied as the best card in the set. That means that I don't have like necessarily true 10 out of 10s here, like where I'm like, oh, this is crazy, like omniscience level, where I can look at the card and go, okay, you definitely are going to want to play this in every deck. I think Demolition Field is really close to that. You're only getting things by matching activated gems, but I feel like with 10 gems being activated, this is going to be very easy to trigger. So this could wind up being a 10 out of 10. I need to play it. This could wind up being the best card in the set for me from the Masterpiece range. I need to play it and see, but it does look like it will be very powerful. Not only are you gaining a lot of mana with a maximum of 40, which is a lot, but you're also going to be destroying your opponent's supports and vanguards. And so there's a lot of really nasty supports in this set. For that matter, there's just a lot of nasty removal in this set. I feel like this set could be coined Removal of Outlaw Junction or something, because you're just getting, there's so many removal cards. I think in total I have 15 amongst my chase list cards, which is so many. Next card should be a surprise to no one, Desert. This is a 13 mana land desert, and it's going to make it so that whenever a gem is converted to any color, you're going to decrease all colored mana bonuses of that player's planeswalker by 1 until the beginning of your next turn. I spoiled this card. I gave more of an in-depth review of it on my spoiler, so if you want to hear that, by all means, go ahead and check out that video. But this deck and this card entirely neuters gem conversion and gem conversion decks, right? Because you can have the mana bonuses go into the negatives. If someone converts 20 gems to green, for example, then all of their colored mana bonuses go down by 20. into the negative range. They're not going to lose mana for it, but they're certainly not going to gain mana for it. It also has, when the first opposing creature attacks, you're going to deal X damage to each opposing creature equal to your loyalty, and then you're going to destroy an opposing support card at random. So this thing not only completely neuters gem conversion, but it also is going to kill your opponent's creatures, and it's going to get rid of their supports. This one for me is another 9 out of 10. It's only a 9 out of 10 because it affects you as well, and I really like running gem conversion. I think for a lot of players, this card could very well wind up being like a 10 out of 10, but just for me personally, it's a 9 out of 10 because I like to run decks with a lot of conversion. I think this is going to pair incredibly well with Demolition Field, because things that are going to just give you mana and not convert gems are going to be very powerful with Desert. The support destruction winds up being redundant between the two of them because Desert destroys supports and Demolition Field also destroys supports. However, I don't think that that's really what you're going for if you're running these two cards. You're just being mean. So this looks really, really good to me. Next one on the list is going to be Desolate Mire. This is a 10 mana support land. It's colorless. It's got 3 shields. It's got activate 4 white to gain 6 mana and 3 loyalty, and activate 4 black to give your creatures death touch and lifelink until the beginning of your next turn. So this card is incredibly powerful as well. The activate 4 white, we'll just have to see how difficult that is to achieve, those like matching those gems or destroying them, because you can get a maximum of 24 mana and 12 loyalty per turn just by popping those gems. You could definitely run this in a deck where you're running white conversion, and then that will wind up giving you just ridiculous amounts of mana and loyalty. However, what's really cool about this is that white right now just has absolutely absurd ways of gaining loyalty with things like Faithbond Judge or with Golden Wish. But even though this is activate for white, the card is colorless. So you're going to be able to run this in any deck you want and potentially gain a ton of mana and loyalty out of it. Beyond that, you're also able to give all of your creatures lifelink, potentially every single turn, which is also a major boon. Back in the day, the Sorin Vanguard from War of the Spark was used a lot because it gave all your creatures lifelink. And then this is something that can just be run in any deck, give all your creatures lifelink, give you ridiculous mana and loyalty. So I could see this one being very, very good. It is activating 8 gems, meaning that you should reasonably be able to match some of those gems. However, because it's specifically 4 white and 4 black for separate effects, I think it's going to be a little bit trickier to make this one go off. So this card here is like a 7.5 to me, just because I don't know how easy it's going to be to reliably and consistently get those activated triggers. If it winds up being very easy to make them happen, then this card is going to jump up easily a 9. But if it winds up being difficult, then it drops down a little bit. So it's one of those things where I need to play with it, but it's very much a card that looks like it's going to be worth you getting your hands on from the set. Next up, Felix Five-Boots. This is 14 mana for a 5/5. It's got Menace and Ward. For the Ward, it's going to be drain 6 from your hand to get rid of it. So this thing's going to be really sticky on the battlefield. It's going to be hard to get rid of this thing. It's a 5/5, I think as I mentioned. It's an Ooze Rogue. This Rogue means that it is an Outlaw. So that's going to pair really well with Outlaw decks. It's got 3 colors, meaning we'll be able to slot it into any Planeswalker with blue, black, green, or just colorless as their color identity, meaning we're going to be able to put this thing in a lot of decks. And this thing reads, when a creature you control deals combat damage to your opponent's Planeswalker, create a copy of that card in your hand and give that copy full mana. This card just looks absolutely insane to me. Not only is it going to be a pain to get rid of this thing, but if you just let it attack and then you keep a copy of it just stored in your hand, disabled with full mana, so that if your opponent does destroy it, you just immediately play another one because you're getting a free copy of it every single turn, it's going to be crazy. This is going to be like absurd for summon objectives, cast objectives, however it is that you are thinking that you might build a deck, this is going to be ridiculous. You need a deck that reinforces creatures, this is going to do that. I can see some really cool pairings with Felix Five-Boots, and then Double Strike. If you give Double Strike to all your creatures, then you're going to get 6 copies of your creatures that you'll be able to play every single turn if you've got an open hand. And then there's a new rare black critter that makes it so that whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you reinforce it. And so if you have that thing down, it's also an Outlaw. And if you have that thing with Felix Five-Boots and you find a way of giving them double strike, that card is black, so you can definitely run them together, then you can wind up making a deck where you're getting effectively 12 copies of your creatures every single turn. This card here looks absolutely absurd to me. This one here is like, I'm going to go ahead and say that I think this card is going to be like a 10 out of 10, honestly, actually. I think that this might wind up being the best card in the set. Just in terms of like chasing masterpieces, maybe? I don't know. Well, we'll see. I've got like fluctuating feelings. This card is really, really good though. I love that it's good for power. You can play it flexibly. You don't need to play it with Outlaws. You could run it with Galta or Atraxa to make an easy Atraxa loop to go infinite. You could make it for a Galta loop to just get a bunch more Galtas, which is, I'm sure, what everyone in the world thought they needed in their life was more Galtas. But yeah, this card just enables so many strategies that I think that this is just a solid 10 out of 10 card. Very, very good. Lock and Load. 16 mana blue spell. It's got the new plot mechanic on it. So for plot, 16 means that if you exile this from your hand and you have 16 mana in your hand, it's going to gain the plot emblem, and then it will enter your hand with full mana at the end of your turn. So this card reads, discard your hand, draw 4 cards, and then the last two cards in your hand gain full mana. If we ignore the plot emblem and we just focus on that, this card is phenomenal. Discard your hand, draw 4 cards, give the last 2 cards full mana. The only thing I don't love about this is that you don't have control over which are the 2 cards that gain full mana, but let's face it, if you're a good player and you have solid deck building, you kind of want every card in your deck, and so this is going to play stuff that you want. If you do wind up doing the plot, then if this card has it, you're going to return each opposing creature to your opponent's hand. So not only can you use this to build tempo for yourself, but you can use it to just wipe your opponent's board of creatures. So I mentioned that there were like 15 cards, I think it was, I said, that have removal elements to them, and this is definitely one of them. So this just does so many things. I think this card is really, really good. This is one of the few cards that I think I would actually use the plot from time to time. I don't love that you can't cast it that turn, because it's not like you can use it in a reactionary way to get rid of things like major threats on your opponent's board. Since you get it at the end of your turn, so you have to wait another turn, meaning that if your opponent has sort of like gone off and then they're going to attack you, you can't use this reactionary to that unless you have this already stored in your hand with the plot emblem on it. So either way, I think that the first part of this card is amazing, and the second part of the card just makes it better. It just gives it more options. So as for Lock and Load, I'm going to put this one as a solid 7 out of 10. You're going to want to get this card. It might honestly wind up being higher than 7 out of 10. Just for like loop decks. I could see this going crazy in loop decks, but this is at least a 7 out of 10. It's a very, very good card. Maybe wind up being higher as well. Omenpath Journey. This set has so many crazy cards in it. So this is a 14 mana support masterpiece. It's green, it's got 4 shields, it's an enchantment, and it reads that this support can't be reinforced, this support can't gain shields. This is very important to note because this support has effects based on being down, and so we'll get into why that's particularly nutty for this support, because this here not being able to be reinforced is absolutely crazy. So it has, when this support enters the board, you're going to exile the first 4 land cards from your library. And then when this support loses shields, return the first support card from your exile to play under your control. Then reinforce that card. And at the beginning of your turn, this support loses a shield. So let's try and unpack this a little bit, because this just does so much. It's got 4 shields. Every copy of this that comes down, it's got 4 shields. So if this winds up getting matched and losing a shield, it's going to exile 4 lands, and then it's going to bring those lands onto the battlefield and reinforce them. And then this thing's just going to naturally lose shields every turn, meaning it's going to be giving you a land every single turn. You can play multiple copies of Omenpath Journey, and so let's say that you have 2 copies of this down. You're running a green conversion deck using the green Puzzle Masters cards, and you then have those go off. They convert the board to green. This is a green enchantment, so it's going to be on a green gem. It's going to lose shields. Both of them lose shields. Both of them give you a land, right? And then let's say that winds up cascading. They both lose shields again. Now you're getting 2 more lands. That's 4 lands. They're reinforcing. That's effectively 8 lands. And you get the idea. this is going to be absolutely bananas. You're going to be able to get so many lands and reinforcements. We have some events that require us to have like lands come out or supports come out. This is going to do that. This is going to get you a lot of those. It doesn't cast them, so you have to be careful about that. But this card just looks bananas to me. Absolutely bonkers. For me personally, this card is an 8.5 out of 10. It might wind up being like a solid 10 out of 10 for me, but I need to play it first and see. We've just got so many good lands, and then we've got some cards in the set that really benefit off of having lands and reinforcements. So I could just see this going ape nuts and doing horrible things. We do have Desert. Desert is going to be a natural counter to this because you're going to be trying to get as many converters down potentially as possible, but at the same time you could just run this with Desert and Demolition Field and stuff like that, and then just ignore entirely the conversion aspect of it and just get free deserts for days. So Omenpath Journey, amazing card, definitely chase worthy. Let's give it an 8. Let's give it an 8. I think it might be better. I think it might be a 9, but let's give it an 8. This card looks really good to me. Next up is Pest Control. Pest Control is going to be great if Spree is easy to trigger, and Pest Control is going to be mediocre if Spree is not easy to trigger. So this is an 11 mana masterpiece spell. It's got white and black in the color identity. Spree, remember, is going to be whenever you match a gem, then your Spree counter goes up by 1. It'll stay that way until effectively the beginning of your next turn. So if you're running conversion, this will be really easy to make happen. If you get cascades or you match intentionally, this will be really easy to get that Spree counter up. But what it's going to do at Spree 1 is each opposing creature gets a permanent -1/-1 debuff. Then you're going to destroy an opposing card at random. Destroy an opposing card at random got nerfed with the new set. So it's going to no longer prioritize creatures and then supports. It's just going to truly be random. So it's honestly fixed, not nerfed, but I see it as a nerf because getting rid of your opponent's creatures for sure is really, really nice. But nonetheless, Spree 1, everything gets -1/-1, and you're going to destroy an opposing card at random. Spree 2, each opposing creature gets -2/-2, and then destroy another opposing card at random. Then Spree 3, opposing creatures get -3/-3 permanently, and an additional -3/-3 for each of the reinforcements, and then destroy an opposing Vanguard support at random. So not only is this going to destroy 2 guaranteed cards at random, it's going to potentially get rid of your opponent's creatures as well by getting rid of their power. If they're running tokens, you're almost definitely going to be getting rid of them. And yeah, this just seems amazing. It wipes creatures, it wipes supports, it wipes things only from your opponent's side of the battlefield, and I feel like it's going to be really easy to trigger. So Pest Control, I'm going to put it as a 7 out of 10, just because destroying an opposing card at random against something like Puzzle Masters of Johnny might not be great. So there might be situations where this card isn't as good, but there's just so many situations where I think it will be amazing that I think this is solidly worth it. Stolen Goods. 22 mana, blue spell, create a copy of all opposing non-token supports on the board under your control. This does not include Vanguards. It doesn't say Vanguards, so probably not. It might, but probably not. Then return all opposing non-token cards to their owner's hand. So this gets rid of all of your opponent's creatures, all of your opponent's supports. It's kind of like a River's Rebuke on steroids because you're also getting a copy of all your opponent's non-token supports under your control. So remember, if your opponent's hand is full or they don't have room in their hand to get all those things back in their hand, those cards get destroyed. They don't just like stay on the battlefield or something. So they go bye-bye. So this card is really, really good. 22 mana is a bit steep, but honestly, for a board wipe that also gives you potentially a bunch of stuff, I see this as a huge win. This card, to me, is another 9 out of 10. Yeah, getting rid of all your opponent's stuff is just too good. It's not as good as, like, Ruinous Ultimatum, but, that just is so good. And then, I think this is our last one. Yeah, it's the last one, is Torpor Orb. Torpor Orb is a 9 mana support. It's an artifact, it's got 4 shields, and has when a creature enters the battlefield, disable it immediately. It will not trigger enter the battlefield effects. And then if it's an opposing creature, it will also gain stun counter 1. I'm interested to see how disable and stun counter 1 work. I'm wondering if it gets disabled for 2 turns as opposed to 1 turn, because this is going to disable it until the beginning of its controller's next turn. So we'll just have to see if this is like 2 turns of disable, but yeah, that's a lot of lockdown for creatures. Galta is not happening with this. Atraxa, not happening with this. Tortoise, not really happening with this either, because you're bringing things back from the graveyard, and then they're going to get disabled. So when another support card enters the board, disable it until the beginning of its controller's next turn. Furthermore, then each support that isn't named Torpor Orb from that controller loses a shield. This can affect vanguards. So this stops time bubbles. Time bubble enters the battlefield. All the time bubbles lose shields and die. You're up against Puzzle Masters of Johnny. They use one of their abilities to put the Puzzle Masters of Johnny tokens down. They all immediately die. So Torpor Orb looks like it's going to counter a lot of strategies. However, just like with Desert, I don't love that this also counters you, because all of these effects are going to affect your opponent, but they're also going to affect you. So for me personally, Torpor Orb is like a 7 out of 10, where it's a card that I want to have, and I'd love to know that, I'm going up against Puzzle Masters to Fairy, and I'm just going to automatically throw this into my deck. I'm not dealing with ambiguity. No way. No way, Jose. However, if I'm not running up against something like that, then I'm probably not going to use this very much, because I just feel like there are better options for control in the game. So I like that this counters some really annoying strategies in the game right now. I like that this gives us further control options, and so that's why it gets a 7 for me out of 10. So that's it for me for the masterpieces. That's all of them. Let me know if I missed one that you think is going to be really, really good. Let me know if any of my rankings are, you think, kind of off or whack, just because you think that they should be higher or lower or what have you. I love hearing from you guys and just getting more ideas for some of the cards that are coming up, see if I missed anything. But yeah, that's it for me for this one. I'm going to be trying to make a video on masterpieces, this one, mythics, rares, commons and uncommons, and then a different one where it's just going to be combo cards, where there's some really cool synergies in this set, and so I just want to outline some of those synergies as well. So that's it for me for this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.